Why is the world so mean? Everything just keeps getting worse. Crime is up, murder is up, except maybe not? Meanness enthusiast, Professor Jelly here, and today we dive into the Mean World Syndrome page on this episode of Weird Wikipedia. So according to the article, Mean World Syndrome is a hypothesized cognitive bias wherein people may perceive the world to be more dangerous than it actually is, due to long-term moderate to heavy exposure to violence-related content on mass media. So I know that there's some of you out there who are already reeling at the concept. There are people out there who would purposely paint an unrealistic picture of the world for personal gain? Impossible, I say. Impossible. One of the biggest points of evidence that gets brought up in favor of this idea is that the murder rate in the US is actually much lower than what it was in the 90s, but if you were asked a group of people, the majority of them would say that it was actually much higher. With Mean World Syndrome saying that this disconnect between reality and perception is the result of consuming mass media. So not even touching the dumpster fire that is the news, just think about how many people get killed in your favorite TV shows. As an example, Smallville is like a completely normal, basic cable show, and there's like 100 people in this town, and 100 people get murdered a week. They have high school children just getting ground in the pig slop like on a daily basis, and everyone's just like, oh, do you think that Bill and Stacy is going to get back together? This effect is so pronounced that there's actually a direct connection between the amount of TV one watches and the amount of fear that they feel about the world. So it's pretty easy to see how you could have a warped view of the world. So, and I just want to say, like right here, this is not saying that like video games cause violence or whatever. This just means that this media exposure to this disproportionate amount of violence and bad things makes you think that there's more violence and bad things in the world than there actually is. Just being exposed to something can make you think that something's a lot more prevalent than what it actually is. I'm also sure that there's a lot more people who imagine that a cook and a waitress can afford this apartment in Manhattan based off the media exposure. The most important studies of this theory come from the work of George Gerbner, who testified before a congressional subcommittee in 1981 saying, "Fearful people are more dependent, more easily manipulated and controlled, more susceptible to deceptively simple, strong, tough measures, and hardline measures." I also want to say that it's incredibly important to remember that when George did these studies, it was over 1960s television watching, so it's easy to imagine that social media would probably have a more pronounced effect. The effects of Mean World Syndrome have been studied in the way of trying to explain human behavior. As an example, you have security companies who are trying to push this like growing crime wave idea to sell more units, or political parties trying to push it to secure more votes, blah, 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 blah. So I think that it may just be important to always remember what your parents told you as a kid. Just because it's on TV doesn't mean it's true. This has been Professor Jelly. If you like this video and want to see more like it, make sure to subscribe. Thank you.